All right, ladies and gentlemen,
Celeste.
just want to thank you all for joining us. So today I have the pleasure of talking to Dr. King. And when I say that, I know immediately you probably thought about Dr. Martin Luther King. But we have a Dr. King with us today. I'm with Dr. Alveda King. Dr. Alveda King, of course, she is, sure, she doesn't need my introduction. I mean, she's a founder of Speak for Life. She's a contributor with Fox News. She has done a great bit of advocacy in her life. She is a daughter of the late Reverend A.D. King and Miss Naomi Barber King. And of course, A.D. King's brother is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so, Dr. King, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today and ask you, how are you today?
I'm good. Is it Juwan? Is that the way you pronounce it?
Dewan. Yes, ma'am.
Dewan,
Dewan.
Dewan. I'm great, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and your viewers and listeners. It's just
Okay.
awesome. Yeah.
So I very much appreciate that. So I just want to start with growing up. I was always very enamored with the civil rights movement and studied it and wants to know all about it. But you actually lived it, and you had a firsthand view. And so I just want to start by just asking you, what was it like to be a child of the movement? Because that can't be a normal childhood. Like it just that can't be a normal. What is it like to be a child of the movement? What was that like for you?
I was actually a child of the movement and a woman of the movement.
Hmm.
I got married in 1969, a year after my uncle was killed. And then a week later, my dad was killed. But during those years, I marched. I went to jail for open housing or fair housing. I was in the middle of the bombing of our home. So I was a child and then a young woman in the 1950s and 60s. And so it was a tumultuous time, but it was a time for faith to grow and love to grow. And that's what you're going to find in any season and any time. And any time, because it's almost like a cycle. Revivals come where you have faith rise up, and then you have times of challenge where darkness comes in. And there's the time that I think about most is the Middle Ages, for example,
Hmm.
when all knowledge of God, Bibles were taken away. You could only have the clergy talk. So you have all of those types of cycles. So I lived in a time of revival and struggle. And so it was, I was a normal kid for a while, just a very short while. My parents shielded me and my grandparents from what was really going on into the world until I was old enough to be involved in it myself.
So I have to stop you because you casually said when our home was bombed. That's not a normal statement. So if you can we go back to that just for a little bit? What do you recall about that? What do you
The
recall about that?
The year was 1963. My uncle ML and Coretta's home had been bombed in Montgomery
Hmm.
before that. And so there had been a bombing of their home. We did not necessarily expect that our home would be bombed in 63, and yet it was. And so the whole account, my mother tells it best. She passed away in 2024 when
Hmm.
she was 92, but she wrote in her books and in all of her documentaries, she fully describes how the home was bombed and we were all in the home.
Hmm.
We did not necessarily fear, though. The night that the house was bombed, my dad got us out to safety. And then he calmed the crowd that they wanted to riot and overturn cars and throw Molotov cocktails. That was not the people who lived in the area in Birmingham.
Hmm.
Those were outside agitators who were paid to come in and stir up anarchy. So my daddy stood in the midst of all of that. And the way he exposed them, I thought it was so brilliant. He spoke to the people of the community. He says, stop, stop, don't riot. Go home and pray. My family and I are okay. Please go home. Please go home. So all the people in the neighborhood went home.
Hmm.
And so the violent anarchists were exposed. And so I thought that was just brilliant. I did.
And so for me, I have to think that growing up in that environment, that could induce hatred, that could induce even violence, that could induce a lot of things. But you were not just shaped by that environment, but you were shaped by two dynamic people. So you mentioned your father. So let's talk a little bit about that. The Reverend A.D. King, who was a dynamic preacher, a leader in the movement, particularly the Kentucky Christian Leadership Conference, and even before that. So you talked about open housing in Kentucky. He played a big part in that. In fact, Senator Georgia Davis Powers would not have been elected without your father's advocacy. So
That's true. That's
yeah,
true.
he has a lot to do with that. Tell me how these individuals shaped you. Let's start with your father. I just want to talk about him specifically. How did your father shape you as an individual? What do you see in you from him? How did he shape you, specifically your father?
It's hard for me to stay in a singular track with that, but I'll put it this way. My
Okay.
father taught me the miracles of Jesus. And as a preacher, as a community leader, he was very charming, very fun, very loving. And he would preach all the miracles. Jesus turned the water into wine. Jesus walked on the water. Jesus healed the sick. He talks about the lepers bringing sight to the blind. But he just electrified that. When he talked about, one of his favorite songs was "It Is Well With My Soul." Another one was "Peace Be Still," and how Jesus spoke to the wind and the waves and just said, "Peace be still." So I believed in Jesus long before I became a committed Christian in '83, just because my daddy preached it. So this is one of my favorite examples of that. Daddy was a great youth organizer in the civil rights movement. He was a great youth pastor. So he took the youth to Pensacola, Florida one year.
Hmm.
And while we were there, Daddy was also a championship swimmer at Morehouse College, and he won awards and all of that. So, and then I'll jump off point and come back. So that's why when they said he drowned and there was no water in his lungs,
Hmm.
everybody knew he was a championship swimmer. He wouldn't drown in his own swimming pool. But anyway, let's go back to Pensacola. So we were there and we saw the ocean before us. He had taught all of the kids, all the youth, how to dog paddle, doggy paddle. He says, because we're going in water and I want everybody at least not to be afraid of water. So I jumped into a wave when we got down there. I didn't know. And the wave picked me up and carried me out. And so I said, "Daddy." By the time I got to E, he had cut through the waves and he lifted me up out of the waves.
Yeah.
And I said, "Where's Jesus? Didn't you say he could walk on water?" I mean, it was that real to me, everything that he taught. So he taught me when his brother was killed, I did want to hate white people. I was
Hmm.
like, "Daddy, I hate white people. They killed Uncle M.L." He said, "White people didn't kill my brother. White people didn't kill your uncle. The devil did." He said, "We're one blood. We're not even separate races." He preached that. Martin Luther King Jr. preached that. My mother, Naomi, Dr. Naomi Ruth Barber King preached that. I teach it today. So that was daddy. Now, granddaddy being opposite from that, not opposite, in a different part of the same lane, talked about the least of these and
Hmm.
caring for others, and that it was our obligation and responsibility. And he taught all of his church members. Many of them were homeowners, small business owners, and all types of things. But he was teaching people to care for others, not just yourself. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the love of God. And my mother was such a warrior. Dr. Naomi Ruth Barber King, Christine King Ferris was in education and business. Big Mama was a worship leader. That's Daddy King's wife. So I grew up among people of faith. Hostility and hatred, we just were taught. You have to love and forgive. You have to love, forgive, love, forgive. Mark
Yeah.
11:22. Have faith in God, and when you pray, believe and you can have it. However, when you pray, forgive so your Heavenly Father can forgive you.
So let me pick up that because you introduced your faith. So you obviously you grew up in a very strong Baptist background.
Yeah.
Your grandfather was known nationally in Baptist circles. In fact, uh, you know, uh, I just blanked out that quickly. The brother in Chicago who was the president of the Jackson, president of
Okay.
National Baptist Convention.
Okay.
Daddy King helped him get that position, right?
He
Daddy King actually
absolutely.
helped
He
him
helped.
get
So
that.
he was a kingmaker himself. He was.
Absolutely. So you have a
Yeah.
very strong Baptist background, right? And so I'm just kind of wondering, since you opened the door, what was your journey in faith like, right? My dad is a preacher, and so for me personally, and my folks are classic Pentecostals coming out
Yeah.
of the Apostolic Church. It was Jesus everything, and then I sort of kind of did my own thing, and today I'm just wherever I am. But I'm just sort of wondering, what was your journey in faith to where you are now? Because I imagine the faith you had as a younger person is not the same faith you have today. Is that fair to say?
Well, I can take some words from my uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Before a knock at midnight, it's a sermon he preached, how he heard
Hmm.
the voice of Jesus say, "Stand up, Martin Luther, stand up for truth and justice, and lo, I'll never leave you." He was already preaching, leading the movement and everything. And he said it was his daddy's God God was not his God, God was his daddy's God. So before 1983, God was my family's God. I didn't have a real genuine personal relationship with God until 1983 for me. But my grandfather, I remember he said something, and I hear him now almost. And I had a nickname, Alveda, but I said, say Al, because my daddy was Alfred. Vita means life, so let me have my whole name. But at the time, anytime they called me Alveda, it was very serious.
Yeah.
Alveda, there will be no Baptist in heaven because it's all going to be the same. And he would also say, we're one blood and one human race. He says, but I was born a Baptist, I'll die a Baptist, you know? And so that was the Baptist faith has always been very important in my family. I left in 1983 when I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And I wanted to know if it was true that people could lay hands on the sick and they could recover. And I've seen that it has happened for me. I
Hmm.
wanted to understand what speaking in tongues meant. And I do speak in tongues today, but I had to learn all that for me. I
Hmm.
couldn't accept it because other people said it. And so that's how I left the tradition of our family. I'm a non-denominational Christian, you know.
Understood. And I wanted to, and forgive me, but you did open the door about your father's and the swimming pool. If you're willing to do so, let me speak for myself. I personally believe, having seen everything, having watched everything, a man who could swim that well to be found as he was in the swimming pool does not really add up too much for me. Um, but I do wonder, you were very young at that time. What do you remember at that time in your life? And how did that challenge your faith? Or
I
did it challenge
wasn't
your faith?
I wasn't so very young. I had been married for about a week.
I
And
would consider that young.
it was young enough. It was young enough. I'm
Yeah,
75 today, but I get it. But I was like, Daddy, come back. Because I was there when they pulled his body out of the pool.
right.
I saw the bruise on his head. My mother saw the choke marks, the bruises
Hmm.
on his upper torso when she went to see his body. And I was like, Daddy, come back. Ah. And I heard in my heart, why would he want to come back to this? It was just as clear. And I said, wow. So I never abandoned God, but after daddy was killed and my uncle was killed, 74, my grandma was shot, playing the organ, all of that, I abandoned my faith for years from that time, from 1969 until 1983. And so I got into the Wiccan faith and looked into astrology and looked into Buddhism, maybe Muslim. I looked at all of it,
That's a
you
long way
know,
from the National Baptist Convention, Dr. King.
way, way off. But I
That's a
still,
long
now listen,
way.
but still, I would make it back on Saturday and get in
Okay.
church Sunday and sing in the choir. Would
Is
you
that right?
believe that? I could really do that with all of that.
Okay.
And so it took 1983 when it was so funny. I took a job. I had been a state legislator. I was a pretty budding actress, just many things. I was married. The second time I had been divorced and remarried, all
Hmm.
that, and had abortions. Just you'd have to read all my story to hear all that. But in '83, I went to work at Atlanta Metropolitan College, and they said, "There's a lady here, and she's weird. Don't talk to her." And she carried this big Bible case with it's a red cover with a sword on it. So back then, if you say don't do something, that's the first thing I was going to do. So they said don't talk to her, so I engaged her. And she walked me through the Bible thoroughly for a long time that day. And every question I asked her, she was able to answer it in faith out of the Bible.
Hmm.
And so I did what's called the sinner's prayer, Romans 10:9, acknowledged that I was a sinner, that I needed a savior, asked God to forgive me, and that I wanted to live for him. And I never changed from '83 to today. And I've been a non-denominational Christian. And people ask me all the time, because I was with some Buddhists or Hindus or something recently, and I went to their service, and they said, but we thought you were Christian. Why would you go there? I said, I am a Christian. That doesn't change that. And I went and sang a song about God to them. I really did. And so I go among people of all faiths, people with no faith, but I don't know. Because people challenge me all the time. Are you sure you're a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. I really am. So,
Now,
yeah,
now you mentioned some of your advocacy on the issue of abortion, and you mentioned your faith journey. So let me just ask you about that a little bit. You're very outspoken, and people have been critical of that, right? Because by your own admission, you've just said, "Hey, I lived a different life before Christ," right?
yeah.
And so I'm sort of interested in your politics with that journey. So for me, I remember the first time I voted, I was actually in grad school, right? I was aware that politics was a thing. I knew my parents maybe voted every 4 years, but it just wasn't a part of my world in that way. So tell me a little bit about your political journey and how faith sort of intertwines with that. Like, because again, you're coming out of the movement, you're in the movement, and your politics there. So tell me a little bit about that journey and how your faith plays a role in that.
My grandfather was a Baptist preacher. He was very engaged in politics. My dad, before his death in Louisville, was very engaged in the law and lawmaking along with his brother. So I was on the governor's council in Louisville, Kentucky, for example. I worked in political campaigns in the early 70s all the way up into the 80s. And my grandfather encouraged me to run for office myself.
Hmm.
And he and my second husband backed that, and I was elected as a state legislator. At the time, of course, well, not necessarily, of course, at the time I was a Democrat. My
Hmm.
granddad was a Republican, and
Correct.
he switched parties because my uncle was in jail, and Kennedy and Nixon were running. Nixon actually wanted to help him. His team said no. Kennedy's brother Bobby didn't want him to help him, and he said, John said, "No, I got to do it. I have to help him." So my grandfather said, "I have a suitcase with 20,000 votes. I'm going to give it to whoever gets my son out of jail." It was just that clear. So that's how Granddaddy left the Republican Party, and there was an exodus into the Democratic Party from American blacks.
Hmm.
And so I watched all of that. I was a part of it. I was elected as a Democrat to 2 terms, left there, became an independent, became a Republican based on the issue of education first, not abortion,
Hmm.
because I
I
was still
remember.
pro choice at the time. But I thought that, I remember saying, President Clinton is on public assistance. He gets a check from the government, but his daughter can go to any school. Why can't
Right.
all children go to any school? And I'm still like that today. I'll see things and I'll just, the analogies, if they don't line up, I don't mind mentioning that.
Hmm.
So I became very political through all those times, and I accepted Christ in 83. And that shaped some of my worldview, became a biblical worldview.
Hmm.
And so that's how all that happened.
I see. And today, I think you and I both would agree the world is not in great shape. Is that fair to say?
It
It's
certainly is not.
yeah, it's not in great shape. And so as I look at it, I look at the civil rights movement and what people were trying to accomplish. And you look at the data today, for example, black unemployment, black home ownership, black infant mortality. These numbers have not actually really changed since 1968, right?
No, they
And
haven't.
yeah, and so from where you're from, where do you see the failure or the disconnect between what the movement was trying to accomplish and what exists today? What is your view on that?
My uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., called what we are experiencing, have experienced here, man's inhumanity to man.
Hmm.
In other words, you see, because I do have genuinely a biblical worldview. I just got back from Armenia, where they were murdering and slaughtering people over Christianity
Hmm.
versus their faith. Or if you go over to Iran, I just did a memorialization of some women who wanted to uncover their hair and stand and have an independent voice. They were slaughtered. Or
Hmm.
here in America, we still do the skin color wars, even though there's only one blood and one race. So I don't see just the plight of African Americans or blacks here in America. I see that same kind of behavior. Idi Amin was African,
Hmm.
and he slaughtered and cut up his own people who didn't agree with him.
Hmm.
So I don't see it as a skin color issue. But to answer your question statistically, who was it? Patrick Monahan, Senator,
The Moynihan
and
Report.
the Monahan Report, and he told his own colleagues and folks, he says, you're trying to control one group of people, one class of people, one color of people, and you want to hold them back, but it's going to spill over. The law of unexpected outcomes is going to get you. and one day it's going to spill over to everybody. They didn't believe it. So they continued to try to oppress Black people only because when slavery ended and it was no longer profitable, the South didn't want slaves anymore, sent them back to Africa. Africa didn't want them because they said, you've been spoiled, we don't want you. And then when I was in Africa, my tour guide, who was from Africa, oh, we're so sorry. We sold y'all to the white people. That's the
Mhm.
first time I thought of it that way, because we always say they stole us. No, they didn't. Our own brothers and sisters sold us. So all of that is part of humanity's inhumanity. And that's how I look at all of that.
Yeah. And again, I grew up in the church, and I often remember thinking about the text when Paul says that the gospel is really the power to reconcile Jew, Greek, slave free into one body.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah,
think
that's true.
what I wanted to be true growing up was that the gospel had the power to reconcile black, white into one body. Now, I'll be candid with you. From where I said, I don't know that that's happened. Like, I haven't seen that as a reality, right? I think there's some surface examples of quote unquote integrated churches or multiracial churches, but just below the surface. And the one example that I think about often, Fred Price back in the 90s, he taught a year-long series on race, religion, and racism. And I remember how viciously people came after him for just saying, this is what has happened, and here's the
Yeah,
consequences.
yeah.
And so it just sort of, so from where you're sitting, you would say that the gospel has that power. And I'm wondering what you see as the disconnect in the modern church for that being a lived reality from your perspective.
The modern church does not preach the gospel. This is just that simple. And I do in every way and every opportunity I get, and I get the pushback, even around my own communities or anywhere that I go. And I'm standing there with people, and I said, you're one blood, one race. They won't say it. They just won't say
Mhm.
it. Well, we know that. Everybody knows it. I said, then say it. Just say it, that actually we're not different, that we are one blood, one race. People really fight that. People resist that. They don't want to hear that. The gospel has that power to unite. Jesus proved it. And during his time, that's why Christianity still exists today, because there are people who will not bow their knee to skin color Baal. I just happen to be one of them. So when
Mhm.
we don't do that, and then see, we lie and say, oh, I don't see color, I'm colorblind, then you need a doctor. You have a medical condition. Something's
Sure.
wrong with your eyes. You have to see my ethnicity. You have to see me. You have to celebrate me and accept that we are one blood and one race. The gospel does have that possible power to unite us. But if it's not taught in every generation, on every decade, and on every platform, and in every genre, then people forget it.
Um, so again, you've been very gracious, and I won't to take more of your time. I'll try to let you go here, but I want to ask this, and I'll let you sort of go where you want to. I think one of the disappointments that I've had historically with the American church specifically is the lack of prophetic energy. And what I mean by that is I look at the book of Joshua. There's a part there where the captain of the Lord's army appears to Joshua, and Joshua said, hey, are you with us or our enemies? Now, for context, Joshua is leading God's elect people.
Mm-hmm.
And the angel's like, none of y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not with you, right? And so when you think about it, it's kind of mind blowing that this angel can say to God's chosen man, I'm not with you either. But
Mm-hmm.
yet in our politics, we seem to divide God up as if God is on this side or that side. What
God's
I
not.
admire about the prophets in
Absolutely
Hebrew
not.
scriptures, they went off on the kings. And so one of my disappointments with the black church is when you have a George Bush in office, everyone is Amos the prophet. But when Obama gets elected, everyone wants to take pictures with the president. And I will say the same for the white church. When a Republican gets elected, God is reigning on the throne. And then if you see Obama, Satan's everywhere. Whereas I don't think Amos would really be partial to either. And so for a Christian, you say you're a Christian, how do you see that? And what should the church be saying to this present administration? What should the church be saying to our state governments? What should the church be saying to our city councils from your perspective?
Okay, there's no American church, there's no black church, white church, Latino church, Native American church, Korean, all those splinters. We have to remember that we all bleed the same. We're one blood. and we're one human race. So the church in America, just like the church anywhere else on the planet, needs to preach the real gospel. Jesus came to bring the kingdom of God, and he demonstrated that so clearly and so beautifully in so many ways. And when we are able to begin to move through our world like that, and so when I hear the American church, the black church, the white church, to this, and so we have to see ourselves first as just human. And so Jesus said he had sheep that we don't even know about. And that's why I tell people all the time. So we can accept, just think like this. We'll say Judeo-Christian,
Hmm.
and we'll say the Messianic Jew. If I say Messianic Muslim, people just want to kill me. And I say, what you're saying doesn't make sense. Oh, they serve another God. I say, no, they don't. Ishmael and Isaac had the same dad and Keturah's children too. I said, they serve God and they recognize God as creator. I say, because those women were messing around. I mean, what woman in her right mind on purpose sends another woman into her husband's bed in the first place? And then her children are bound to have to fight with each other. You see? So
Hmm.
I'm just saying, we have to stop all of this. And I told some people, I was at one of those racial reconciliation things a few years ago. I said, I'm not coming to any more of these. Well, why? Why, Alveda? Why Dr. King? I wasn't Dr. King. Well, honorary back then. I earned it. So I said, because I'm tired of you washing my feet, crying all over me. I said, if you don't let me wash yours back and we both go to God and say we're both liars and we need to admit that we are one, then I'm not doing it with you anymore. So that's what I'm saying. We have to honestly recognize that God is our creator, one of the family. He finished it with the shed blood of the undying blood that was so pure from Jesus Christ that it cannot die. The minute his sweat, dandruff, whatever hit this earth, and then the blood off of the cross, it transformed everything. But you can only accept that by faith. So when I hear people fussing all over the politics, which one are you, and this and that, and oh, it's just too much. It's too much.
Understood. Lastly, if folks want to connect with you, how can folks connect with you, reach out to you, get involved with you? How do you recommend that?
AlvedaKing.com has contact information. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all that. AI, people afraid of it or they worship it, one or the other. Jesus defeated the prince of the power of the air on the cross. And so that's just a title. Jesus is stronger than AI. So when I do use anything, artificial intelligence or any of that, I put the gospel out there. So you can find me, just Alveda King. Even email me, alvedaking@gmail. So, yeah,
And lastly, do you have a last thought that you'd like to leave us with, or something that you want us to think about on the way out, Dr. King?
here you go. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. There you go.
I was going to start harmonizing with you, but I remembered I can't sing, so I didn't. Uh, but
Tap your foot then.
Dr. King, thank you so very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we will be back very soon with another installment, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. God bless.